Hello and welcome. Bella and I are coming live to chat a little bit about some stuff that has been coming through that we thought you all could benefit from. We're going to talk about the sword in your life, what it represents, and how you can use it for yourself, and also a little bit about what's going on in transit right now with the 8 and what's coming and what's exciting for us. So I guess as you're hopping on, just say hello. We are actually streaming simultaneously into Bella's group, Living Matrix. So if you're not part of that, you can jump in there. And in my group, Your Life by Design, if you're not in that, you can jump in there. So Bella and I have our own individual communities that we support. And I think we're going to try to be diligent and what's the word? We're going to keep showing up each week. So hopefully you can expect us to come in to do some more of these things in the beginning of each week, and we'll bring forward what's coming. So this is kind of like cosmic forecast, but we're also bringing through like archetypes and in this case, the sword that's coming up for a message not only for us, but for you as well. So we're going to let you know how you can use the sword in your life. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Bella?
No, I'm excited. I haven't been live in this group for a long time, and I used to go in every week and see what was posted. And then you and I have so many things going on, so I just feel like you were saying, the kind of the guilt, like sometimes that makes you take action. But I feel for me, this community is super beautiful. I started this group exactly a year ago, and there's 2,400 members or something now. It's amazing to see how many people are in here, and that's what I feel like I want to show up. And to do it with you, Ashley, it's so much more fun than to do it by myself.
Yeah, same here. I love it. Yeah, and it's super amazing. I mean, I remember when you first started the group, and then it was slow, and then something happened. It was like boom, explosion. I'm like, this is so cool. Plus, I feel like too, people who have fourth lines in their incarnation cross, you guys are meant to create and foster community. So it's perfect role for you to be that facilitator and the leader of. So it's really cool to see how this has blossomed.
And I kind of like it, Ashley, too. Your group is, your life, what's the name of your group? Your
Life by Design.
Exactly. So it doesn't have the gene keys or human design in it, and Living Matrix doesn't either. So it's also this kind of little bit of the rebelliousness to see you're bringing in the things that are important for you. Sometimes we see your kids in there, and I also bring in the things that I feel. So that's also the community of bringing your flavor, being in the 8th gene key right now, the archetype of the influencer and style, your own unique style, to create that community where you are nurtured, and not only where you show up to kind of teach somebody else something. Like I felt when you draw the sword, I'm like, oh my God, I know that this is my card right now.
I'm excited to dive into this to see kind of like what comes through and what you're connecting in your life, and hopefully what's connecting in other people's life. Because what I'm reading from, actually, I pulled a card from, it's called the Archetypes Guidebook, and it has the diamond, which it just so happens like the diamond of the self is what the 8th gene key talks about. And I feel that too. I pulled a card this morning in my group, and it was the 48. So we have resourcefulness. I feel like sometimes people get stuck in the systems and the teachings, and like, I'm not good enough until I know it all and I can't share it. And then they also get comfortable with the teachings, and they're like, I only want to talk about gene keys or human design. Mm-hmm. And we're not trying to fall into that trap either. We're here to teach you, illuminate, to talk about what's exciting us. But I can't say that in 10 years I'm still going to be talking about the gene keys. That would be so limiting and constricting for me. But right now, it's what is exciting and important in my life and in Bella's life. And so what we're doing is we're bringing you the archetypes so that you can connect to them more easily. Like what I was saying, bridging the gap between human design and gene keys, so that the archetypes come to life in a more tangible, practical way, so that you can start to embody them and play with them instead of it being so like elusive for you. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be fun and playful. So we pulled the sword, or I pulled the sword, and here's the picture. And this is what it says. It says the sword, the knife, the blade, the weapon. To use the sword is to decide. The blade separates one reality from another. The choice is made, and all else falls away. If you find the sword in your grasp, you can no longer hesitate. This weapon requires a clear and decisive mind and a willingness to act. An onlooker may think the sword bearer is hasty and violent, but the most compassionate and responsible gesture is one that is honest, swift, and accurate. Our first encounter with the sword is at birth, when the cord we share with the mother is cut. This moment defines our separation from her and begins our journey of becoming ourself. We must make these cuts again and again if we are to grow. Decisions shape our life, and the sword is an infamous shaper of destiny. And so the keywords here are boundary making, prioritizing, and clarifying. And it says that are all gestures made possible by the sword. The sword is a metaphor for the pen and the brush, the artist's fierce and graceful tools. So when this is light, it's cutting through to what is essential. And when it's dark, it's hasty, backstabbing, and a dull and painful blade. So this is the sword. What comes up for you initially as you're...
I mean, it makes me think we are working with archetypes in the 64 doors, so we are creating archetypes for all the gene keys. But what this made me think about was the Jungian archetypes, the male archetype or the masculine archetype. So this word for me is very much the king that isn't afraid of cutting, that knows the direction, that knows what needs to be done, and that does it. And the other archetypes are the lover, the magician, and the warrior. So I feel myself being my life's work is the gene key 2.4. I'm very much in that kind of lover, like include everything and keep everything and nurture everything. And then the king, I don't allow this word to come in and cut. And that's I feel like it's not only now, actually, it's part of my life path to see sometimes we need to cut and to be fearless in that cutting in order for other things to have space in your life. And also sometimes a no is good because it creates space for something, and it allows somebody else to go to go somewhere, where they couldn't if there is this maybe thing. So I'm feeling that I want to invite this word in my life and kind of walk into my king or queen archetype more, and to see that the lover is serving, informing the king, so the king can make the good decision of what to cut. So that's what becomes clear to me, I guess, when I hear about this word.
Yeah. I think too, for me, I'm feeling like, is there an echo?
Yeah, a little bit.
Let me see. Okay. Oh, yeah. So I think for me, for the sword, before we got on, we were kind of talking about cycles and when it's time to kind of up level, you're going to need to kind of separate yourself from whatever that cord is, from like, it's from reality to reality, or from up level to up level. So anytime you're making that, you have this death, there's always a birth. And when there's that birth, you're going to need to cut that cord from that other reality so that you can truly expand and grow into that self that you're wanting to be in this new reality. And the same thing happens in relationships. I feel like the sword is also what can help us make a decision to stop clinging to relationships, clinging to jobs. I mean, I have the third gene key in my pearl, and you have to ask yourself, what are you clinging to? And even in this time of like separation and COVID, like, were you really clinging to your job? Because now maybe you don't have a job, and it kind of was the sword for you. So like, how has this situation and circumstance been the sword for you when you were kind of holding on? How is this a blessing in disguise? Because now you have all this space and room to come into the next level of expression. And it's exciting. It can be exciting. So whenever we can look at the sword too, you want to be decisive, like the card was saying. It's saying like, be decisive, in like swift and firm. And if you're half-hearted with that sword, you're not going to penetrate anything. It's kind of just going to bounce back at you. It's not going to cut through it. You have to be like sure and true is what the sword does, and it just severs it. And yeah, I feel like that's what I feel about the sword. I'm trying to feel into how it shows up in my life right now too, so I can kind of bring that in. We are going into the Venus sequence, and I love that in our inner circle group, and I love that it was talking about the first time the sword was used was kind of when you're born and the umbilical cord is cut. That's so cool for me. And how we continue to cut the umbilical cord. It's like not a one-time thing. That's the thing that separated us from the beginning, right? So first we're one and we're inside that oneness with our mom, and then we come out of the womb, and then boom, separation. And so that's like the initial wound we have, is that wound of separation. We're breathing and we're eating, and all of our functions are happening within and from our mother, and then boom, cord is cut, and now it's like there's a separation. You have to be yourself now. You are separate from mother. And so I don't know, going into the Venus sequence, it's like we're coming back to that original wounding, and we're picking up the parts of ourselves because we didn't know not to leave things behind, because we're into separation, and I feel like it becomes a pattern. Like, oh, we just separate. We separate. And the things that are uncomfortable and the changes that happen whenever we meet a new phase, we separate. So oftentimes people don't even ever grow up because they're stuck in their EQ, because they've separated from that part of themselves, and it's still sitting at the table waiting to be incorporated. But maybe trauma has happened to say, let's just leave that there. Let's cut. Let's just cut. But we're not meant to cut parts of ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to keep integrating. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, so much. And that, how do we use this word? Because we have that original memory in the cells, because it's not a conscious memory in the cells of the separation. And then either we might, like you say, we might take this word and just cut out parts all the time because we don't want to feel, for example, or we go into this more, and that's the more reactive. I'm just going to cut because it doesn't feel good. A kind of third line theme that, okay, I'm out of here. I just want a white slate like sheet. I want to start over again. And then we have maybe the fourth line, for example, that is going to do this, or the first line is going to feel so unsafe, or you really don't want to go into rejection again. So that it's just going to keep like hiding this word, because it feels bad to do it again. So are you overusing your sword, or are you not using it at all? And how can you become the king to know when are the times when it's going to be constructive to cut? And a little bit what we were saying too with Archangel Michael and those kind of stories around how can you cut off everything that isn't true? And are you brave enough to do that? Because right now, like you're saying, there are a lot of things that are not stable, and it's easy to cling to things and be like, okay, right now I can't cut this because it's already all over the place. And then we are postponing our genius. We are postponing our truth on the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes too, when we cut, it's like, what are the ramifications of cutting? And like, what happens when you're like completely separated from that? You're thrown into this whole new dynamic, this new process, this new way of being. And it's like you get propelled into chaos, and then you got to pick up the pieces and kind of organize it and then create harmony for yourself. But if you never cut, then you stay safe, but then you also don't expand and you don't grow, and you just stay with your anchor points. So what kind of, I'm kind of curious to see, like, how do you guys see yourself using this sword? What is showing up for you in your life that this kind of seems appropriate for you? Because I'm wondering, the people that are watching this, how are you using this sword? What spoke to you? Like, what's personal for you and what's relevant for you?
Yeah, and are you overusing it? Are you afraid of using it? Are you the king in your life? Or are you maybe taking on more of the lover or the warrior, the magician? Like we work a lot with the archetypes, and that's also an invitation into the 64 doors with all these free content every transit, where you can go and you can take on the costume of an archetype. And maybe if you are one of the other archetypes more in your life, or the shadow of them, how can you decide to have this week your tool is a sword? Like, how would you use it? And to step into that, because there's almost something with it. Fake it until you make it, which kind of is vipassana too. Like, these kinds of things that are really deep teaching. Sometimes it's like, you just have to do it. And even if it doesn't feel natural at the beginning, there is a liberation. I remember being in a long relationship that was quite terrible early in my life. And I left twice or three times in in the last years. And every time I left, my reality shifted. The moment I was out of the house, whether I was in a hotel or with a friend, like I was suddenly free. And I realized that reality can just shift. And it's actually many times, like you're saying, it's our clinging that make that, and our mind that it's going to be so complicated, and we have this and this and this together, and I just have to do this first, and all these things. But actually, sometimes it just takes one cut, and then you relate your reality is different.
Yeah. So I would investigate and see, like, are you familiar with the sword in your life? Do you overuse the sword, or is it something that you've never picked up in your life, right? And now you're trying to figure out how to cut. How do I cut? And then you have the people, like you said, third line, who cut everything. And so instead of using the sword, why don't you ask the sword, like, what wisdom do you want to share? Like, how can you help me discern what to cut and what not to cut? And what is there for me when I choose to stay instead of cutting? Because I can see that happening so much, is like when you feel like, I don't know, something about escaping or blaming, and okay, if I do this, it'll be better on the other side. Like, I don't need you. Let's cut and go back to one. I'll just be myself. I'll just be the individual. So I don't want to be here. I don't want this experience. I want another experience. I'm hungry for another experience. And so talk to your sword and ask and discern, like, what needs to be cut, what doesn't. Where do I need to stay? And I feel too, like, sometimes we use the sword to punish too. And what comes up in my life personally is there's so much like family dynamics that I'm like working through and looking at without giving too much of a backstory. I feel like the pattern that I have learned is that we need to punish our spouses. Like, if things don't go right, like, I'm going to punish you, and I'm also going to keep cutting the cord, and you're not going to have access to me. And I'm going to keep you from being intimate with me or connecting to me because you wronged me. And if you can't let go of the past, and if you can't like move closer, you keep using the sword to cut the people that are closest to you. So how are you using that sword? Is it like honorable? And I feel like we can pull in the 38th archetype, the warrior archetype, and you can I feel like the sword is that archetype's tool. So maybe eventually we'll bring in the tools of the archetypes, but right now I feel like the 38, that is that archetype's tool. So how can you work with that archetype and also understand how to use that tool effectively, efficiently, and honorably?
Yeah, and I felt something when you were speaking of the relationship, and I felt, there's also the possibility that you would be in a relationship just because you know that person would never use the sword. Like, they would never cut you off, and they would never say these and these and these and this behavior in your life, I don't like, you need to cut them out. Or it's like you would be with somebody who is never going to take up the sword. So you can kind of continue with some of your patterns that probably are not constructive for you, but you choose a person like that because you are lazy in a way. I can see that be a possibility too. So there are many in relationship. There are even more cool things to look at. How is this word used, and how are you using it, and how is, for example, your partner or other people around you using it when it comes to the relationship you have together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and are you using it against each other? Are you aligning towards a goal, and are you coming as a united team and a united front, and you're not using the sword at each other? You're like, okay, how can we take on the world together? How can we take on these challenges as a team instead of like running at each other? You'd spend so much time just bickering, and there would be no expansion. There would be no I don't know, because the warrior archetype is also linked to the risk taker archetype, and you have to know like which risks are worth taking, because sometimes it is constructive to have those hard conversations with your partner and kind of face sword to sword with each other, right? Because you're working something out, but it has to be with the right intentions. You can't be like, let's cut each other down, and like, I want to make you so vulnerable that like I'm on top. Like, if there's a winner, it's like, are you guys fighting for love, or are you fighting to be like a victor? What's happening with that sword?
Yeah.
So, we're talking about relationships, and I feel like there's a lot of opportunity and potential for you guys to go. If you haven't ventured into your Venus stream, it's so important, because once you can anchor into the core stability by going through that activation sequence, understanding what are my gifts, how can I achieve that core stability? That's what we've been working on with the Inner Circle community. for this good portion of this year. And now we're kind of traversing into this new realm and saying, okay, can we come into the body? Can we have that core stability? And then once you have that core stability and you're fully anchored in your body, you can start looking at your relationships, because you're taking that radical responsibility for yourself, how you're showing up, and you can start observing and witnessing the relationships and how you've actually manifested them and produced them from like what was happening inside you. Because the microcosm is the same as the macrocosm. You're manifesting it out of you. These are mirrors, the relationships. So you can learn so much by looking at your attraction sphere, your purpose sphere, and then kind of, again, like we were saying, like reclaiming those parts of yourself in the IQ, the EQ, and the SQ that you cut from your life. And it's about bringing it back in so that you can live whole, complete, and with an open heart, so that when you travel into the pearl sequence, you're doing it altruistically, you're doing it wholeheartedly, and you're not feeling like there's a piece of you that's empty that you need to fill, like, oh, I'm sorry, inner child, you're not good enough, I need to fill with something else, like I'm gonna push you away, or I'm gonna push my inner masculine away because my inner masculine and feminine just can't hang out together, so you're not allowed in the party, like get out of here. So
and one of the biggest, I guess, it's almost an epitome, I feel, and that's what we were speaking about in human design, the mutation in the emotional center. I feel like many of us are using this word in the emotions. Like either we put them in the ground far down, or we kind of throw, every time they come up, we throw them in the cupboard and close the door, which looks like worse in a way than if they're really repressed. But there are those patterns where that's a part that I feel like needs to be invited, and that can actually be behind this word instead and help us to discern. What I feel in the future is that the mind is not going to be reliable, because there are so many things we take in from around us. So if you just are going to use your mind as an instrument, you're not going to know your truth. You need to bring in your emotions, and that's actually going to be the compass. When that emotional center is not blocked anymore, it's going to be a compass for you to know your truth, to feel your truth, more than to mentally know it. So for me, that's a very big part of the Venus sequence, and to learn to be the witness of that, and staying when you want to escape, which is connected to this word, but it's like it's a nuance. And these are the kind of nuances naturally that we go into the inner circle that we can't really speak about here. But there are so many tricky ways, and that's where I mean, in my relationship with you, I feel like I have that mirroring, because there's so many times that you're like, you kind of think you figured it out, but then you're actually bypassing the truth a little bit. So to have those kinds of relationships and to meet on a weekly basis with other people too, and co-create and be like, okay, yeah, that's true, but this little thing, I'm feeling like you're going into this pattern. And to have that loving kind of relationship where you can be you, and where the kind of mirroring we didn't have when we were kids, maybe there wasn't a loving mirroring that would steer you, like would be the banks of the river. No, it would be either squeezing you or it wouldn't be there at all. So I'm so excited about, even in this group, like this is kind of the first taste of a community, but the more close we can do it and be there for each other and learn that the mirroring we didn't have as children is possible, then even that separation from the beginning kind of heals through that reciprocity that we can create. I can't hear you, Ashley. Are you muted?
Oh, hello. I was muted. I muted myself. I was just saying, yeah, it's amazing. I'm excited. If you are interested or curious in coming and traveling the Venus stream with us, you can still hop in the inner circle. We are going into something in June, and then we should be starting that end of June, July, and we'll be traveling that together. But this next month is definitely about anchoring into core stability and seeing like how we fit into the bigger picture, and how we show up here. So like the microcosm and the macrocosm, and how they are the same. So it's gonna be fun. So I'll drop the link for that later for the inner circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there anything else?
I don't think so. If you found this useful or valuable, or anything stuck out to you, I'd love to hear what you thought about the sword, and again, how that's showing up in your life. So if you're watching the replay or on live, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. And if this was if this was fun or useful or valuable. We'd love to do some sort of stuff like this again. So just wanting feedback from you guys would be amazing. And yeah, thanks for joining us. And I feel complete. Do you feel?
Me too. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Bye.